Next, let's queer up business. Another major business surrenders to conservative threat. In a notable shift, Jack Daniels has scaled back its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives following threats from conservative influencer Robbie Starbuck. Starbuck, known for targeting companies over the DEI efforts, recently announced on Twitter, quote, "Big news. The next company we are set to expose was Jack Daniels," end quote. He also mentioned that the whiskey giant has already altered several of its DEI programs. Starbucks suggested that Jack Daniels preemptively changed its DEI policies after, quote, "They must have been tipped off by us through employee LinkedIn pages," end quote. An email from Brown-Forman, Jack Daniels' parent company, revealed the decision to end partnerships with the Human Rights Campaign and the Corporate Equality Index, which monitors LGBTQ workplace policies. The company cited an evolution of its DEI program to a, quote, "strategic framework." Eric Bloom of the Human Rights Campaign condemned the move, criticizing Starbucks as a political bully and election denier. Bloom warned that Jack Daniels' decision risks alienating a significant portion of its customer base. Quote, "With nearly 30% of Gen Z identifying as LGBTQ and the community wielding $1.4 trillion in spending power, retreating from these principles condemns both consumer trust and employee success," end quote. We've been covering these stories. We talked about it with Microsoft. Again, I work for a large corporation. A lot of these policies are being weighed and measured with what's happening from public outcry. They're being measured against a board of directors and profitability. The liquor industry specifically, again, I know from doing Hollywood Pride and doing lots of events around the community, and all of us know it's very hard to get sponsorships. Part of it is they're having budget cuts because they're all suffering from sales. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, Jack Daniels and Brown-Forman, I believe, scored a 100 on the Corporate Equality Index from the HRC, which means their employees are being protected, which I think is something we all should be applauding them for. And this rebranding is part of, again, the Supreme Court case has caused companies to have to rebrand initiatives that they're not specific to women, to LGBTQ, to Asian, to Black, and to make them more, which I think they're using in that language, more inclusive around their strategy. So the words, sometimes we want to just, let's boycott, we can't boycott everyone because it's not going to work. What we have to do is put our words and be more strategic. And I think that's what the companies are doing. And I applaud them for, again, having, they're a welcoming culture. It says in the article that I read about them today that, they give benefits for transgender, medical care. I mean, so they're doing things that are not being covered in this story just because they're maybe not sponsoring Pride.
They're not just wearing, a Pride shirt every day.
Exactly.
Not just during June.
They're not just
not just during June. Right. Good point.
They're not just not having a DEI program, they're also cutting ties with the Human Rights Campaign.
Right.
So there's no Supreme Court case that says you can't interact with the Human Rights Campaign. This goes back to what I always, talk about, whether I'm talking about in The Advocate or Washington Place, like corporations at best are fair weather friends, and even then, I don't know. I'm not saying that like a queer group shouldn't basically take their money. Please liberate as much of their money as possible, but don't expect much. And if times get tough, know that they're going to abandon you.
I look at Wilton Manors here and Hollywood that I believe both have perfect scores for HEI, which is awesome. Holy Cross, we've done our score, with HEI, and everything's different. You've got cities, they have different guidelines, hospitals, they have clearly different guidelines. Corporations do as well, but it is basically about the protection and the inclusive, that everybody's protected, everybody has rights. And to be pushed back by, I don't know, a single person on Twitter, I'm just like,
well, that's
I just saw,
me too. Like, where does he come from? A long line of doing this, or does he just, like, who is this person? I thought of coffee. His last name.
And
so I was like, is this a Starbucks article we're reading right now?
And I'm not a big pusher of like the spending capital of people, but something HRC had reported on a couple of years ago. The #1 employer of LGBTQ people are restaurants. Who's going to be distributing Jack Daniels more? Are restaurants and bartenders. Maybe they might not be so willing to suggest Jack Daniels going forward because of this. Like a lot of this doesn't make a ton of sense. Like one guy on Twitter, is that a able to influence Jack Daniel.
Yeah, he must be very convincing.
I mean, I also have to believe too that, again, I don't believe it was one person on Twitter that changed their entire corporate policy, because again, Brown-Forman is one of the largest spirits companies in the world. I don't think this one person did it. It could have been timing. It could have been we were ready to announce it and now we want to announce it now. There could be a lot of that. Since we did bring him up about who he is, you know, he's a failed filmmaker and a failed congressional candidate.
Oh, great.
He's attacked trans people, and with he had that whole theory about that toxic chemicals are causing people to become gay and trans, and for children to identify as LGBTQ, and also believes that pride flags are indoctrination. So yes, he is trash. So this was not a thing about not giving him any power. He is complete trash, and an election denier on top of that.
Wow.